I needed to just have that tiny crack of willingness. And that's what my sponsor told me. She's like, you don't need to jump into this. You just need to crack the door open and say, are you willing to keep your mind open? So, today willingness for me is really turning it over. It's turning it over to now, I know not a religious God for me. It can be for other people, but for me, it's really just, I like to think of it as the universe, a higher power, more simply just something that's not me.
Welcome to the Daily Reflection Podcast with your hosts, Michael L. and Lee M. On this podcast, we try to bring inspiration through interviews with members of the recovery community. You are not affiliated with any 12-step program, but you may hear them mentioned throughout the course of an interview. On today's show, Susan D. from Glen, Pennsylvania. Susan shares on the concept of willingness. We hope you enjoy this episode.
I'm great.
Morning,
How are you
Lee.
doing this morning, Mike?
I'm doing great as well. It's great to start another episode.
Today is
who do
March
we have
7th,
today?
and we have Susan D. here with us from Glen, Pennsylvania, and she's here to share with us on the daily reflection for today, which is the key is willingness.
Oh, fantastic. Well, Susan, welcome to the podcast. It's great to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Terrific. Well, would you introduce yourself to the audience? Let the folks know who you are, where you're from, maybe talk about your sobriety date, and then we'll get right into it.
Sure. I'm Susan D. and I'm an alcoholic, and my sobriety date is August 18th, 2014. So I have just over 6.5 years in the program, and I am from Glen, Pennsylvania.
Great. Well, welcome to the show. We start the show in the same way every day. We ask the guests to read the daily reflection for today. Would you help us get started?
Absolutely. I'm reading for March 7th, and the key is willingness. Once we have placed the key of willingness in the lock and have the door ever so slightly open, we find that we can always open it some more, and that's from the 12 and 12, page 35. The willingness to give up my pride and self-will to a power greater than myself has proved to be the only ingredient absolutely necessary to solve all of my problems today. Even the smallest amount of willingness, if sincere, is sufficient to allow God to enter and take control over any problem, pain, or obsession. My level of comfort is in direct relation to the degree of willingness I possess at any given moment to give up my self-will and allow God's will to be manifested in my life. With the key of willingness, my worries and fears are powerfully transformed into
That's
surrender.
beautiful, Susan. How does that resonate with you?
I think willingness is really, like they say, the key to everything, and I think willingness looks different to me in different situations, but primarily what this reading really meant to me was, and this is something I work on constantly, is really my willingness to get myself out of the way. And how do I do that? I do that by actively turning things over to my higher power. Really, from the beginning, I had no faith at all. I had this whole God thing was a mystery to me. And, I didn't have any faith. And I really was under the delusion that I could manage people and outcomes and situations. And, it was almost revolutionary to me when I heard that I had no control over any of that. And, it started with, like I said, willingness changed, right? At the beginning, I needed to just crack the door open a little bit to be willing to see that something I was very unfamiliar with, such as the program itself and the concept of a higher power and all that, that something that I was so unfamiliar and that was so strange to me could possibly work. And again, that's where I needed to just have that tiny crack of willingness. And that's what my sponsor told me. She's like, you don't need to jump into this, full bore. You just need to crack the door open and say, are you willing to keep your mind open? Are you willing to keep your butt in the seat? Are you willing to keep your ears open? If you are, then you have a start. And that's what started it for me, really. And I realized, with a little bit of time that AA is strange to everyone. at first. And I don't think any of us have any aspirations to, end up in a chair in AA and all these preconceived notions I had about it being a cult and it being religious. Those things were all put in the right place for me, and all these myths were were shown to me to be false, but only because I kept my mind open, and I had that willingness. So, today, willingness for me is really turning it over. It's turning it over to now, I know, not a religious um, God for me. It can be for other people, but for me, it's really just, I like to think of it as the universe, a higher power, more simply just something that's not me, right? It's just not me. People used to say to me, can you just, even if you don't believe in something, can you just say that it's something that's not you? And I was able to say that because when I came through the doors of AA, all I knew was I couldn't stop drinking on my own. Nothing I did worked, but AA worked. And all of a sudden it was like, okay, well, I know that has nothing to do with me. So at first my higher power was AA in itself, and then it evolved. But, really what it is for me today is I get on my knees every morning and I have, a morning routine. And I ask to get myself out of the way, to align my will with what my higher power's will should be for me for the day, and to recognize that willingness today is synonymous with acceptance for me. Acceptance is really seeing that everything in the world, and like page 17 says in the big book, it's the crux, like really the baseline of my program, which is that everything in this world is exactly as it should be in any moment. And I have no control over it. I only can control how I react to everything, right? And with that, the more I'm on the beam about that and the more I live in acceptance, the more I'm able to feel the serenity that I want. I got sober not to be miserable, not to be, you know, a dry drunk, not to be worse off without a drink in my hand than with a drink in my hand. And, that allows me to really see that when I surrender to what is and I live in acceptance, that's where I feel the peace. But I have to have a willingness to do that, right? And a willingness to turn things over aren't the easy things. Those aren't like, there's no willingness to, there's no sort of thought process or like a surrendering in situations that are easy. Willingness is the most difficult for the things that matter the most, the things that I want a certain outcome for, the things that, I feel like I deserve, or whatever. And especially, with my daughter who's 15, all the things that I want for her that I don't want to let go of, that's where the willingness really is tested. But what works for me is simply to be able to say, like, it's not up to me. I like to think of it like this. I'd like to think of it almost as this stream of it is what it is, right? It's almost like it is what it is like this constant flow, if you will, in my life. And that flow, no matter what I do, I cannot change that. That's a constant. It's an objective thing in my mind. And I can either align myself to this, or I can come at it and I can bounce off of it and I can try to exercise my own self-will and I can fight it and I can think that I can manage things, but it is what it is, that constant thing still is unchanging. And so I can either go with it and I can go with the stream and I can feel more serenity and I can see where it takes me, or I can fight it. I can bounce off of it. I can try to, get myself in the way, but nothing changes. And that's what acceptance is to me. And the willingness to say, hey, it's not me, it's you. And you for me is my higher power.
I love that. And it all ties in to the month of March and the third step, turning our lives and our will over to a power greater than ourselves. And I love the way I mean, you basically said exactly what the daily reflection is telling me today. And my level of comfort is in direct relation to the degree of willingness I possess. And that is inversely, there's an inverse relationship between that and my self will. So it's really beautifully put. I also noted that the reflection talks a little bit about the sincerity. And I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about how you know your willingness is sincere.
That's a great point because, sometimes my willingness is is really just doing the next right thing, as we learn in this program. And sometimes my willingness is very sincere. I am, if I'm going to be honest, I'll say, my willingness to do certain things is sometimes easy, even though it puts me in discomfort. I know that, I need to do this. I can see that it's the next right thing, or I can see that it's, even if I don't know it's the next right thing, sometimes it's just the next indicated thing, right? The difference now is I know what the wrong thing looks like. So I'm able to do the next right thing. But sometimes my willingness, even I just go through the motions. I go through the motions because the real difficult things for me, I've learned through experience, is is what I've heard in this program, which is, my thinking isn't always right. When I'm left to my own devices, my thinking isn't always right, and I need to change my thinking. But I can't think my way into right thinking, right? I need to act my way into right thinking. So, they say like I can't think my way into right action. I have to act my way into right thinking. And that is directly tied to my willingness to do the next right thing. And sometimes I just go through the motions, right? I know that if I do the next right thing, it may feel uncomfortable, but it's going to get me closer to where I need to be. And I don't always know where I need to be. I today recognize that my higher power can see 10 steps ahead. I can't. I can only see the next thing, but I do know that to inform my next few steps, to inform steps 3 and 4, I need to do steps 1 and 2. My alcoholic mind, I want to go to step 3, 4, 5, 6. I want to be at 10 and know how it ends. But I need to do 1 and 2. That's the willingness to do the next thing. And whether I feel sincere about it or whether I don't feel sincere about it, of course, I wish that I always felt sincere about it. But today I know what works. And even when I don't feel sincere about it, I know what is right. And so I do it. And it works. It always works. It always works that I am shown as I do one thing what the next thing should be. And sometimes the willingness is just to stay still too. It's to take that step and not have any answers come back to me. And to do nothing, I realize, is also an action today. Sometimes I just need to be patient and give enough breathing room and enough pause to hear what is coming back to me from my higher power. I used to be early in this program and, I was told to turn things over. So I'm like, okay, I'll just turn it over. And it was sort of like I would dump and run, right? Okay, I can't change this. I'm just going to dump it. Now it's evolved to where I start to look for what's coming back at me. I'm not just throwing it down and just like sort of like washing my hands of it, right? I'm giving enough pause. I'm taking enough prayer. I'm taking a couple of deep breaths and I'm saying, okay, what is coming back to me that I need to hear? And I know that it's never it's never going to be in a clear like white light moment for me. It's usually going to be in a way that I can understand it on a human level. It could be like a little intuition. It could be a little thing while I'm praying in the morning. A thought will come to me. It can be something that I notice in my dreams. Like I feel like my higher power is going to talk to me in a way that I can understand, but it's not going to be like this, parting of the clouds and all this, nowadays. So to be able to let it go and to say I accept what comes back at me is going to be exactly what should happen is an amazing thing. And I had to get there by surrendering, and I had to understand that surrendering wasn't, throwing up the white flag. Surrendering to me is merely looking at the facts of a situation and deciding what I'm going to do with those facts, right? Facts are not subjective, they're not emotional. It's, the sun rises in the east and sets in the west. There's no arguing it. So when I look at things, I take them for their face value and I go, okay, this is again what it is, and this is how I can react
I
to it.
hear what you're saying about just needing the slightest bit of willingness to affect change. But what happens if you don't have the willingness? Have you ever had a situation where you just weren't able to muster the willingness, and how do you handle that?
Absolutely, absolutely. I think with AA, it's a different recipe for everybody. Some people are more big book, some people are more steps or whatever. For me, the fellowship is a huge part of it. I am a big meeting maker, and I have a crew of people that I really rely on a lot. Because I think that the power of this program, the experience, strength, and hope that we can share with each other is how I learn. I try to stay teachable. I try to listen to what other people have to say. And when I get stuck and I don't feel willing, it's a call to my sponsor. It's a call to another alcoholic to say, hey, I know I should be doing this, but I just can't bring myself to do it, and it's to be able to hear them say, hey, I've been in this similar situation and this is what I've done. Or, I've been in a similar situation and I wasn't. This is what I didn't do, and this is what happened. So I do rely on other people to sort of get me in the right frame of mind do the to be able to do the things that I need to do to live better. Absolutely. I am not always willing. And I think one of the things is, like I mentioned, like the more I care about something, the more I want to control it, the more that I want to affect what happens. And a great example is my 15-year-old daughter. And with her, and my sponsor said the best thing ever was, she has a higher power too, Susan, and you're not it. As parents, when they're so helpless when they're little, to, where you really need to do things for them, to them transforming into, capable human beings that still need guidance. It's really not an easy path. But I think from learning the hard way with her, I think she's a perfect example. She was going through a lot of sort of stress and anxiety, and so I got her some professional help, a therapist, and we went in for a session together, and a lot was revealed that I had no idea. Like I just inadvertently had put um, a lot of pressure on her for school, and she plays, high level soccer, and and she was feeling all this pressure from me. And um, I just, I grew up in an Asian American family where school was all important. That's how the opportunities came to my parents. Without education, they wouldn't be where they are today. And I'm a high achiever. I'm, sort of very competitive. So, and I didn't know that I was putting all this pressure on her. And truth be told, it was very um hurtful to hear, not in the sense that she was hurting me, but I felt so guilty for doing that to her. So, and it didn't matter to me that it wasn't my intention, because to me, perception is reality. And her perception that there was too much pressure from me was her reality. And that makes it my reality. And I was fine with that. And, my sponsor was like, I was crying after the session. And she's like, you know what? You're the one, if you think of yourself as, a computer or whatever, you're the one with the higher level of functioning. You're the one that needs to adjust to her. And I was completely understanding of that. But, and it's easy to say, okay, I'm going to change and I'm going to stop looking at your grades online and I'm going to, stop, making comments after soccer games and stuff. But actually doing it is a different thing. Right. So the willingness was tiny little steps. It was being able to see like a grade that was not, up to my standards and keeping my big mouth shut. It was, seeing her after a game, maybe, not be as aggressive as I thought she should be and keeping my big mouth shut, and slowly but surely, me being willing to do the things that she needed, and asking for a lot of help from my sponsor and my higher power to give me, you know, the willingness to even be willing to do it. Because that's what I've been told. When I'm not willing, I need to pray for the willingness to be willing. Um, that has been a process. And I understand now, being in the program, that it's okay. It's okay to not do it perfectly. It's okay to not always feel okay. And as we grow and as I do these things that are hard for me, I'm going to feel discomfort because they're new. Just like when I first came into the program and I was so uncomfortable with the cravings and the not drinking, that was all new. But that discomfort went away eventually. Me doing things over and over until they became more normal, gave me that serenity, and that came from the willingness and me keeping my mouth shut with a little bit has created a new kind of trust between me and my daughter. She knows that I'm not going to jump all over her now. So now she volunteers some information about practice or school or things that she's struggling with, because she knows that I'm willing to listen. And that's what's so wonderful about that, because like in the reading, it says, with the key of willingness, my worries and fears are powerfully transformed into serenity. And that's where the beauty lies, right? My worries and my fears and all this obsession with controlling things and worrying about things, it doesn't work. Turning it over, letting things happen, and knowing that I'm only responsible for my part in it, the effort, but not the outcome, makes it okay. And I've learned today, and I've heard this, from people that are very important to me in the program, is that everything has a beginning, middle, and end, right? And I've learned enough to know that in the end, most things have worked out, and not the way that I necessarily want them or think I deserve or want, but they've worked out, and they've worked out that the way they should have. So if I'm feeling uncomfortable with something, or I'm not feeling great about something in the way that it's going right now, it just means that I'm not at the end. I'm still in the middle of it. And the only way to get through to the end for me these days is to go right through it. I used to drink away everything. I used to circumvent anything that I could. I used to avoid feelings and anything that was uncomfortable. But today I have a program and a tool that allows me to go through something to get to the other side. And I would say, to the newcomer, who I do believe is so important, is that you don't have to read ahead in the book, like you just have to have a willingness, and this is what saved my life, an open mind and a willingness to hear something different, let something different, give something different a chance, And I was told also, if you're not willing to believe, whether it be the higher power or that AA can work, can you at least believe that we believe? And I was able to look around the room, even when I had so many doubts myself, and see that people were living their lives. They were laughing. They were going through things that were difficult, all without a drink in their hands, which seemed immensely impossible to me. But I was willing to believe that they believed in their own higher powers, that they believed in this program, that it was working for them. And that's all I needed. That little crack in the door made me keep coming back. And I've never been more wrong about anything in my life like AA. And I've never been more grateful that I've been so wrong about it because it literally saved my life.
Susan, that's beautiful. And thank you. Do you have anything else to add for the audience?
I would say that when I look at willingness, a lot of it means that I have to shelve my expectations. My willingness to do things differently, my willingness to keep an open mind, my willingness to let my higher power do the work, my willingness to get myself out of the way, all has to do with me letting go of my self will. Sometimes kicking and screaming, but really my self-will is directly tied, I realize, to a lot of expectations. It's future tripping. It's saying, looking ahead and saying, I need this to happen. I want this to happen. I'm afraid this is going to happen, all of that. I need to let that go. I need to continue as I do every day because it's the most difficult thing I do is get on my knees in the morning and ask that the bondage of self be relieved. I do the third step prayer. And I also ask that I may be devoid of any, selfish, dishonest, self serving, self pitying thoughts. And it's all about self. I think this program is all about getting our egos right sized. And that's where it begins for me. I think that's where the growing can begin, is really knowing that it's not me. I am not the center of this universe. And really, I think a lot of that is also giving back and being in service. The willingness to say that I'm not the center of the universe and to get myself out of the way means thinking about others more.
Fantastic. Well, Susan, I want to thank you so much for spending time with us and sharing your experience, strength, and hope. This has been wonderful.
Sure. Thanks for having me.
Thanks to Susan, and thanks to you, the listeners. If you want to find us online, join us on Facebook at facebook.com/groups/Daily Reflection Podcast. You can find us on Twitter at Daily Reflector. If you want to read about recovery, we've got a blog at blog.dailyreflectionpodcast.com. As always, if you're listening on a podcast network that lets you provide a rating, we would greatly appreciate it. It's going to help us understand what you like about the show, and it's also going to help us reach a wider audience. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.